welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be kind of impromptu, but also a video that I've wanted to film for a really long time now, and that is Myles' birth story. And if you have been following my channel, then you'll know my son is 2, so you're probably thinking, why are you filming your labor and delivery story when your son is 2? But I wanted to film this video for a couple reasons, and the first one is I remember every single detail of my labor and delivery so vividly. It was like it was yesterday to me, and I think a lot of that has to do with it was the best and scariest day of my entire life, so it's just like ingrained into my memory. But I don't think that I will always be able to remember every detail as vividly as I do, so I do want to document it so Myles can hear about it. And honestly, I never really shared my story with many people outside of like my immediate friends and family. I didn't share really any information on social media, and a lot of these pictures that I'm going to be showing you in this video no one's ever really seen before because I did not want them posted on social media. So that is reason number one. The second reason I wanted to film this video is it was really important to me to share with other pregnant women who are looking for labor and delivery stories like I used to kind of get an idea of what to expect. And I think a lot of times we see, like on Instagram and all that stuff, fairy tale deliveries with the pictures of, you know, the mom and the baby right after the birth and the skin to skin moments, and that's all great. I mean, that's what everybody hopes for, but I think that people need to realize that sometimes it's not always that Instagram worthy delivery, and as long as you and your baby are safe and healthy, then I think that's the most important thing, and that's what you should really go in to your delivery hoping for. I just wanted to put this story out there so people know that it's okay. Not every delivery is going to be what you expect or what you hope for, but as long as the mama and baby come out okay, then that's all that matters. Honestly, that is what it's all about. It was February 15th. So that night, I remember Ryan was working late, and I stopped at our favorite Thai food place, and I ordered pad Thai, like as spicy as it can get, and I don't even like spicy food, but I read that spicy food can help start labor, so I ordered spicy pad Thai, went home, ate it. I made my husband go for a really long walk with me in the morning, and for breakfast I ate as much pineapple as I could bear because I also read that is supposed to help kickstart labor. So I did all those things as like a last ditch effort to just kickstart my labor. I was so desperate. I'm like, you know, if this doesn't work, then I don't even care. At least I'm trying something. So I leave for work that morning, and I remember feeling some contractions that I just assumed were Braxton Hicks. For whatever reason, for like months, I had felt Braxton Hicks contractions almost every day when I would drive into work. I have no idea why, but I just always did, and I felt them. They were, you know, they just felt like light. You know, if you've ever had Braxton Hicks contractions, you'll know what I'm talking about, but nothing major, didn't even think twice about it. To me at that point, it was completely normal. So I go in, I get to work, and I'm trying to work, and I'm still feeling the contractions, but I'm noticing after about an hour of me being there that they're actually distracting me. Like that was the best way to describe them. They were not painful, but they were distracting. Like I would have to like kind of breathe, and just it was just really distracting me from working. So that went on for probably like 45 minutes, and then I noticed that I was getting more discharge than usual. When you're pregnant, you get all sorts of stuff, so you're kind of used to it, but this was a little bit different. At that point, I was starting to wonder if maybe I was leaking amniotic fluid, and I knew if that was the case, then you need to get to the doctor right away because you can get an infection and it can be really bad. So I called my OB's office and kind of told them what was going on, and the nurse told me that I needed to come in right away, so I did. And at that time I still didn't think I was in labor or anything. I was just concerned maybe at that point that I was, you know, leaking amniotic fluid, and I just was more concerned about that than anything else. Then when they finally called me back, they checked and it was not amniotic fluid, but the doctor, he was like, you know, from what I can tell, you are in early labor and I'm sending you to the hospital. I remember calling Ryan and being like, the doctor said I'm in labor and we have to go to the hospital, but don't get too excited, be prepared, we'll probably get sent home. The contractions at that point, the best way that I can explain it, were uncomfortable and distracting, but not painful. We go, the drive, we're just like so excited. It is just, I can't even explain the emotion and the excitement that we both felt. Like, we just couldn't even believe that this might be happening, and I couldn't believe that this was like early labor and it wasn't hurting at all. So we made it to the hospital. When they finally brought us back to this office, like, we didn't even get to triage yet. They brought us back to an office and we were starting to like fill out more paperwork, or she was asking us questions and stuff. And I remember I sat down on a chair to sign some sort of release, and all of a sudden I had this contraction that made me lose my breath. I just like, it almost, good thing I had sat down because I probably would have fallen down. It came out of completely nowhere, and from that second I remember looking at Ryan and being like, we're not getting sent home, this is the real deal. And everything moved very quickly after that. We finished all the paperwork within like seconds, and they got me back, put me in a gown. We completely skipped triage. I don't know if that's normal. I don't know if it's because the doctor had sent me there, if they didn't even, you know, need to do the whole triage thing, but I got a room right away and they hooked me up and we could see the contractions on the screen. They were coming every 2 minutes and they were so intense. And my biggest thing from day one, I had no shame that I wanted an epidural from the beginning. Like, that was my biggest thing. I even told Ryan, I was like, if anything happens to me, or if, you know, no matter what happens, make sure I get an epidural. Like, I want an epidural, I need an epidural. An epidural is required for me to have this baby. And I literally was probably the most obnoxious person in the world. Any person I saw in that hospital, I told them that I wanted an epidural. I was so paranoid because I had watched other stories on YouTube of moms saying that they got there too late and they couldn't get their epidural, and that would have been my absolute nightmare. Eventually I got that, and it was not nearly as painful as the contractions were. I didn't even feel it, to be honest with you. They did it in between a contraction, which shocked me because at that point they were coming almost like every minute. My contractions were so intense, and if you haven't experienced a contraction before, the best way I can explain it is it feels like, at least for me, when, you know, you get your blood pressure taken on that machine and it like slowly, you know, it squeezes you and then it holds and then it slowly releases. That is what my uterus felt like. It felt like I could feel it. Like, I would feel like it was starting to, it would slowly do this, and then it would hold at like its peak pain, and then it would slowly release, and that would be my contraction. And it was so painful. I give so much credit to anybody who has a baby without an epidural, because that stuff is no joke. They were checking me a lot and I was dilating so fast. Like, my contractions were fast. The whole process was happening really fast. We were just so excited. Even like through my contractions, where I would like literally have to hold Ryan's hand and like clench his fists and close my eyes, and like, I remember something that helps is I would hold each side of the bed and I would just be like I look like a crazy person, and I think Ryan has a picture of it, but that helped. So if anyone, you know, can use that as like a tip for labor, I don't know, looking and breathing like a crazy person kind of helps with the pain. So I just remember having such positive memories of that time. Like, we were just so excited. We were texting family and friends at that point, and it was just like the anticipation of knowing that I was going to meet my baby soon. And I was, you know, Ryan was excited. He was going to cut the umbilical cord, and we already had set up Ryan's aunt's a photographer, and she was gonna come take our pictures afterwards as a family. And we were like arguing over who was gonna get the skin to skin time first. And I'm like, please, like, I'm the one who went through this whole pregnancy. I carried this baby, like, I'm having him first. So just all that fun stuff. It was great. And especially once I got my epidural, I was like in heaven. It was just pure fun at that point. And luckily I had no issues with the epidural. I know some people, like, it doesn't really work or only works on one side. My experience was great. It was like the perfect amount. I could move my legs. It literally just numbed, so I could not feel the contractions anymore. Like, I remember I could vaguely feel that it was happening, but it took away that searing pain, and that's all I honestly wanted. And so my experience with an epidural was awesome. After about 45 minutes after that, the doctor came in and my water hadn't broken yet, so she decided to go ahead and break it for me. And that was a weird feeling because I was like numb, so I didn't feel anything, but you just feel like the water like come out. And there is so much, by the way, like I just felt it everywhere. And the doctor at that point had said that there was some meconium in the amniotic fluid when she broke my water, but she said that, is normal and it should be okay, but that he did have his first poop already, and that was what the meconium was. So she left, and the plan was I was going to be pushing like within the hour. I was progressing really fast, and it was really exciting. And I remember after that, I got all of a sudden really, really tired, and I remember telling Ryan that I was going to take a nap. And then when I had my eyes closed, I started like hallucinating weird stuff. And whenever I start hallucinating, it always means that I have a fever. That is like a classic thing for me to do when I have a fever. And I started to just get chills, and it all like happened within the span of what feels like 15 minutes. Like I just went downhill so fast, and I looked over at Ryan and I was like, something is wrong. Like, you need to call the nurse and you need to tell her that I am not feeling well at all. So he got a nurse, and she came in, and I was shaking, and I was just like a completely different person than I was when she had saw me last. So she took my temperature, and it was over 103. Like, it went from normal to I had a major fever in no time at all. So she called the doctor came in, and once she saw that my temperature was what it was, she was basically told me that you have an infection. That is why you have a fever. That means your baby has an infection, and we need to get this baby out as soon as possible. And I just remember, being I was in shock. I went from, you're gonna push in an hour to feeling so sick and hearing that I need to get my baby out as soon as possible. And I just remember looking at my husband and then looking back at the doctor and being like, so do you want me to start pushing? Like, I just was so confused. And she was like, no, we need to get you in for an emergency C-section now. We're gonna start prepping the OR, and you need to sign this paperwork. So I looked at my husband again, and we're both just like, if that's gonna be the best way for, the baby and myself, then we're absolutely going to do that. So a different anesthesiologist came in and told me that usually for C-sections, they numb you through a spinal tap. But since I had already had an epidural in, she was going to see if she could make that work, just because we didn't really have time to do another spinal tap. She was just going to put the medicine in through where they did the epidural and kind of hope that worked, was my takeaway from it. So it was just such a whirlwind. I was signing stuff. I was like feeling terrible. I was scared. I was confused. And, they just, within minutes, I was laying down flat, and they were rolling me on the bed, and like all you see is like lights and metal, sterile nurses, people looking at you with their faces covered. And Ryan had to go at that point. I remember we said bye, and it was like weird because, I mean, I knew he was coming back, but it was just like, I don't know, it was just all happening so fast. But they took him away to get changed and robed up for being in the room for my C-section. And then right as they rolled me in, they have you drink like this really sour drink, and I don't even know what it is. It's like a shot of this really sour, gross stuff. But I did that, and then, you know, they put the drape up, and I remember them being like, do you feel this? Do you feel this? And like touching me different places, and I couldn't really feel where they were touching me, but I remember I felt like on my thigh, I felt like a pull. Like I could feel something like iron and cold on my leg, and I was freaking out because I knew the whole Spinal Tap thing, and like my worst nightmare would be to have them start cutting and to not be numb. And so she basically was like pinching me like crazy and was like, do you feel this? Do you feel this? And I didn't, but it was weird that I could feel that pull on my leg. But they eventually determined that the Spinal Tap did work, so they started doing everything, and Ryan was there, and you know, I'm still feeling pretty out of it at this point, but I have so much adrenaline in me that I am really excited because I knew that we were about to meet our baby. And within minutes I felt stuff, like you feel like tugging and stuff, but you don't feel any pain. And then I remember like hearing within minutes like a cry. I looked at Ryan and I was like, oh my gosh, go and see the baby, because you know, you could kind of see someone carrying him to, you know, what I assume was like the scale area. And my sisters have had C-sections before, so I knew that the dad could like go and see the baby right away. He could still cut the umbilical cord and like see them weigh him and all that stuff. As soon as Ryan went to stand to go over to see the baby, immediately nurses and doctors were like, no, you need to sit down. And we, you know, sat there and just kind of looked at each other, and it felt like forever, but it was maybe like 5 minutes. We didn't hear Myles cry. No one was like saying anything to us. We're just looking at each other like, you know, something isn't right. Something is not normal right now. And eventually a nurse came over, and she had Myles like swaddled into like, he was like a ball, and I remember all I could see was his face, and for like 10 seconds I saw him, and she brought him over to me, and she was just like, here's your baby, he can't breathe, we're taking him to the NICU. And from that moment, like I still get so emotional over this because it's just still such like a raw like experience. Like it was the scariest moment of my entire life. Like it should have been the happiest moment of my entire life, the first time I ever met my baby. And you know, like your whole pregnancy you like fantasize about what that experience is going to be like. But I saw him for maybe 10 seconds, and then they took him away, and I remember just like looking at Ryan, and we're both just wide-eyed, don't know what to say, don't know what to think or do. And I just remember like all of my sickness from the infection just like boom, it hit me, and my world, I just remember like the room was spinning, everything was spinning, and I'm laying flat, like you're strapped down so you can't move, you're laying flat. And I just remember looking at Ryan being like, I am going to throw up, like I know I'm going to throw up. And I'm like, I couldn't move, I couldn't sit up, there was nowhere for me to throw up. And I just remember like my only option was I turned my head to one side and I started throwing up. And my poor Ryan, I mean, he's standing there and he like cupped with his hands and was like trying to cup it, and it was just like, it was terrible. I just remember like it burned because that sour stuff that they had me drink before, like that's what was coming up at that time. And then they made Ryan leave, and they finished sewing me up. And when they sewed me up, I felt the most searing pain. Like where they had just sewed me felt like it was on fire. It was 10 times worse than the pain of the contractions. It felt like somebody literally lit me on fire, and I was like writhing. Is that even a word? I was in so much pain. Like I had to keep moving. Like movement somehow helped me manage the pain that I was in. and the doctors were really confused. And then once they learned that I had a fever because of an infection, they were like, oh my gosh, we need to get her they gave me some heavy duty pain pills, because apparently one of the side effects of having the infection that I had is you do get extreme pain where, you know, they cut into you. And that's what was happening to me for about 15 minutes after they had sewn me up. I was in excruciating pain. It was really scary, because when I was in the amount of pain that I was, I could see the confusion in all of the doctors' faces, and they were like, what is happening with this girl? Like, it should not be painful. But then they realized why I had the pain that I did, and, you know, as soon as the meds kicked in, it felt a lot better. But that was really, on top of everything else, that was really scary for me. And then they wheel you in. It looked like some sort of nurse's station office thing with all these computers, and they wheeled me in there, and they were like, you know, you have to stay in here until the medicine or whatever, the Spinal Tap, wears off, and just kind of recover in this room. So we were in there, and finally the medicine kicked in, and I just felt so depressed, I guess. Like, I just remember feeling like I felt so numb, like so numb. I was so just like, could not believe the whirlwind of what we just went through, and how like my expectations of what was going to happen and how I was going to meet my baby, and the fact that I didn't even know if my baby was okay. It was just the most numb I have been to the world and that I can ever remember. And I remember my mom got there right during the time that I was in that room recovering, and like as soon as I saw her, like I hadn't cried at all, but as soon as I saw my mom, I was like a mess. Like, I just couldn't even. Eventually a doctor from the NICU came in and said that Myles was stable. I remember him specifically saying that he was stable, which was horrifying to me, because that meant that, you know, he was in like a critical condition when they got him. He could not breathe, and they said that he had aspirated the amniotic fluid, and that's why he basically couldn't breathe. And he also had the same infection that I did, and the infection came from the meconium that was in the amniotic fluid, and it's very rare, I guess. And he got an infection, I got an infection. So when they came up and kind of gave us an update on him, it was not, you know, it was reassuring that he was okay, but basically he left it as like, you know, we're monitoring your son, and you know, that's kind of all they could tell me. Like, they couldn't really tell me anything else. And they did say that my husband could go and see him, and I remember Ryan looking at me like, should I go? And I was like, yeah, go and see him, of course. And eventually they brought me to my room, and I remember a doctor coming in, and this was so bizarre. The doctor came in, and I was like, you know, can I go meet my baby? Like, it was just the most pathetic. I just remember feeling like, is this real life? Like, I'm in a room, my baby is hours old, can I meet my baby? And I just remember the doctor being like, you're like really sick. Specifically, I remember him saying, you're like really sick. So I guess I can't go. And then he explained to me that I had to be on, you know, IV antibiotics, and they had to, like, you know, I was on all these meds, and I just had to like stay and rest, and I was recovering from a C-section, and Myles was in the NICU, and he could not come to my room. I basically wasn't going to be able to see him, and they didn't know when I would be able to see him. When Ryan got back from seeing Myles in the NICU, he had taken some pictures of him so I could at least see what he looked like, and I will insert the picture here. Again, I've never really showed this to anybody. I remember telling Ryan specifically, and you know, my sisters who we sent pictures to, like, I don't want those pictures on social media because, as you can see, he has a tube down his throat. He is completely connected to wires and tubes coming out of him in all areas, and it was just not, it just wasn't, it wasn't good, and it wasn't what I wanted to share. I would just stare at that picture, and Ryan would come in and just say that it was the saddest thing ever, because he would, you know, come in, or anyone who would come in the room, and I would just be looking at pictures of my baby on a phone because I couldn't meet him, and it was just all I had. And, you know, Ryan would go check on him constantly, and he was fine. He was able to breathe because of the, you know, they had a tube down his throat, and he was also connected to all sorts of IVs to give him antibiotics for the infection and all of that stuff as well. Myles was delivered on February 18th, 2016 at 10:01 p.m. and I did not get to meet my son until the next day at around 2 p.m. When I met him and held him when he was in the NICU, he didn't really feel like he was mine, if that makes sense. He had so many wires and stuff, and they were like paranoid that they couldn't get undone. So, you know, I couldn't give him a bath, I couldn't change his diaper, I could barely even hold him to feed him without people like hovering over me, and there was just like so much pressure and anxiety that like I just didn't really get to experience like the joy and happiness and like this bond, because it was like such a high pressure situation every time I saw him. That was really hard. I was really proud that I was able to kind of persevere and breastfeed him still for as long as I did through that entire experience, because it was, you know, breastfeeding, you know, in general can be hard for a first-time mom, and especially when I just felt like I had all these obstacles, to still be able to do it successfully was really nice. Myles ended up being in the NICU for a week, and the worst part was when they discharged me, I wanted to stay. Like, I was like begging them to stay, because, you know, they discharge you, and your baby, if they're in the NICU, is not discharged, so they're still in the hospital. And luckily, thank God for me, I live about 10 minutes away from the hospital that he was in. I didn't really get pictures of Myles that I had hoped for. I didn't get to do the skin to skin. We never did our newborn photo shoot of our family, because he was never not in the NICU while we were there. And it was definitely not what I expected. When I would go see Myles, he was in, there's different levels in the NICU of different levels of how much care your baby needs, and Myles was in the level 3, which is the most intense, when he was admitted in the NICU. And I remember holding Myles for the first time, and the baby right next to him, like an arm's length away from me, was on this machine, like barely clinging on to life, could hardly breathe. It was the most depressing, overwhelming, you know, when you have a baby, you already have all these hormones going through you. It was already already so hard seeing my baby like he was, and then you're surrounded by sick babies, and it is the most heartbreaking thing ever, honestly. Like, it was just seeing him, meeting him for the first time. I wish it was a little different than it was, but you know, if you watch any of my videos or have seen, you know, the relationship that Myles and I had at the time, I was so worried that I didn't get to do the skin to skin. We didn't get to have that bond, but Myles is such a mama's boy. Like, I couldn't imagine us having a stronger bond. Well, we have been really lucky. Myles has been perfectly healthy ever since he got home from the NICU. He's had no issues or anything that resulted from, you know, the infection and the emergency C-section. We've both recovered fine, and everything is great, but you know, it wasn't the fairy tale birth that I had in mind. I wish that I had more pictures or videos, or just, you know, was able to be in the same room with him when he was born. I wish that I had that, but I didn't. And looking back on it now, I know that that's okay. And I just want everyone to know that if that happens to you, as long as you and your baby are healthy, then that is the most important thing. It's not gonna affect your relationship. I was really worried about that. It doesn't have to affect whether or not you can breastfeed your baby, because I did. You can still do everything you want to do. I am sad about the pictures, but we have had so many pictures taken of him since the day he's gotten home, and we had awesome pictures taken once we got back to our house. So, you know, it's not exactly what we planned, but just having Myles in our lives in general, no matter how he came into this world, has been the biggest blessing in our entire lives. And we are hoping with baby number 2 that we have a smoother experience, and I just really want to experience what it's like having a baby and being able to immediately hold them and just have him or her be in the room with me. That is, like, to me, if I can have that for baby number 2, that would be a dream. But I also know from this experience, if that's not what happens, that it's going to be okay. And yeah, so that is my labor and delivery story. I hope you guys enjoyed. It's probably gonna be long. I feel like I've been talking for a really long time, but I just really feel good. I feel like I just kind of got that story out there and like out of my brain, and maybe now I can, you know, because I think back on it a lot. Like I reflect, and sometimes I even have like dreams about it. So I'm hoping just kind of like sharing this story and getting it kind of out of my mind and not feeling the pressure of maybe having to remember every moment of it. I think this will be very healing to me. So if you are still watching and you made it this far, thank you so much. I really appreciate all your support. If you are new, make sure to subscribe. I post videos every single week, and I would love to have you here. And I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.